Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel weird.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent.
There are moments in television history that stop you completely. Moments where you forget to breathe, where the popcorn goes cold in your hands, and where the entire world seems to pause just long enough to witness something extraordinary. The night Courtney Hadwin walked onto the America's Got Talent stage was one of those moments. She was 13 years old, barely 5 feet tall, wearing a black leather jacket that looked like it belonged to someone twice her age. The audience had no idea what was coming. The judges had no idea what was coming, and honestly, neither did Courtney herself. But what happened after that night, the fame, the pressure, the tragedy, the recovery, that is the story most people never heard in full. Today, we are going to tell it. Every chapter, every detail. Because Courtney Hadwin is not just a girl who sang well on a competition show. She is a young woman whose life became a masterclass in courage, heartbreak, and the kind of resilience that cannot be taught. So settle in, because this story deserves every minute of your attention. To understand what Courtney Hadwin became, you first have to understand where she came from. And where she came from was about as far from a Hollywood spotlight as you can get. Hesleden is a small, quiet village tucked away in County Durham, in the northeast of England. It is the kind of place where everyone knows your name, where the roads are narrow and the skies are wide, and where ambitions sometimes feel bigger than the town itself. It was here, on the 6th of May in 2004, that Courtney Hadwin was born to her parents, Anne-Marie and Paul Hadwin. By every account, she entered the world as a perfectly ordinary baby girl in a perfectly ordinary family. But there was something inside her that was anything but ordinary. Music found Courtney before she could even fully speak. Her mother, Anne-Marie, had a habit of filling the house with sound classic soul records, rhythm and blues, the kind of music that gets into your bones and refuses to leave. Little Courtney, barely old enough to walk steadily, would hear those records and just light up. She would raise her tiny hands in the air and move her body to the rhythm with a joy that was completely instinctive and completely real. There was no performance in it at that age. It was pure, unfiltered love. By the time she was 8 years old, her school had introduced her to structured singing lessons. Her music teacher took one listen to Courtney's voice and immediately understood that something unusual was present in that child's throat. The tone was rich. The depth was surprising. The emotion she could pour into a simple melody was the kind of thing most professional singers spend decades trying to develop. Her teacher encouraged her to join the school choir, and Courtney embraced it completely. Weekly rehearsals became the highlight of her week. Performing at school assemblies gave her a confidence that seemed to grow with every single note she sang. Her classmates nicknamed her the Rocker Girl. It was half a joke and half the most accurate description anyone could offer. Because even at that young age, Courtney did not just sing. She performed. She moved. She inhabited every song like she had been living inside it for years. There was a wildness to her stage presence that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and soulful, far beyond her single-digit age. At 10 years old, she gathered a small group of neighborhood children and formed what they proudly called Durham Soul. It was not a polished group by any professional standard. They were children with second-hand instruments and raw enthusiasm, performing for small crowds of parents and neighbors on weekends. But for Courtney, it was everything. It was her first real experience of leading a group, of choosing songs, of understanding how music could pull people together and make them feel things they did not expect to feel. A local newspaper ran a short piece about them, with a headline describing a young girl bringing soul to County Durham. Her parents kept that article. Courtney read it, until the edges went soft. She also attended Shotton Hall Theatre School, where her vocal coach worked with her on the technical side of singing, phrasing, breath control, emotional delivery. But what set Courtney apart from other talented young students was not her technique. It was her instinct. She could feel a song in a way that technique alone cannot explain. When she chose music to perform, she chose songs that matched something she felt inside, and audiences, even small ones, could sense that authenticity from the first note. By the time she was 12, Hesleden had become too small for her dreams, not because she had outgrown the people she loved, but because the gift inside her was pushing at the walls. She wanted to share it with the world. She did not know exactly how to do that yet, but she was already saving her pocket money and writing down her goals in a notebook she kept beside her bed. She was a child with a plan, and the plan was enormous. The question was whether the world was ready to hear her. In the summer of 2018, Courtney Hadwin boarded a plane to the United States for the first time in her life. She was 13 years old, traveling with her family to compete on America's Got Talent, one of the most watched television talent competitions on the planet. The sheer scale of what she was attempting is worth pausing on for a moment. Thousands of acts audition for that show every single season. Most are adults with years of experience and professional training. Courtney was a teenager from a village in northeast England, with a notebook full of dreams and a voice she had barely even begun to fully understand herself. She arrived in Omaha, Nebraska, for her audition at the CenturyLink Center, carrying a small suitcase and a focus that people around her described as almost eerie in its calm. She had every reason to be terrified. She was far from home, surrounded by strangers, about to stand in front of some of the most critical judges in the entertainment industry, in front of a live audience of thousands, with cameras broadcasting the whole thing to millions more. And yet, by every account from people who were there that day, Courtney Hadwin walked through those backstage corridors like she had been preparing for this exact moment her entire life, because she had. When she stepped out onto that stage, the audience took one look at her and made an immediate decision. They assumed they knew what was coming. A sweet little girl, a pleasant little voice, maybe something cute and forgettable. The judges had seen hundreds of acts already. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair with the relaxed expression of a man who has heard everything. Heidi Klum offered an encouraging smile. Howie Mandel settled in. Mel B waited. And then the music started. The opening notes of Piece of My Heart filled the arena, and Courtney Hadwin opened her mouth and released something that had absolutely no business coming out of a 13-year-old girl from County Durham. Her voice cracked and soared with the kind of raw, ragged soul power that Janis Joplin herself built an entire legend upon. She stomped her foot. She threw her head back. She moved like someone who had been possessed by every great soul singer who had ever lived, channeled through the small girl in a leather jacket on a stage in Nebraska. The audience was on their feet within the first 30 seconds. Not politely on their feet. On their feet, the way people stand when something genuinely shocks them into awe. Simon Cowell hit his golden buzzer. That buzzer means something very specific on America's Got Talent. It means that one judge, out of their own personal allowance for the entire season, has decided that what they just witnessed deserves to skip every other round and go directly to the live shows. Simon Cowell, a man who has sat in judgment of performers for decades and who is famously difficult to impress, used his golden buzzer on a 13-year-old girl from a village most Americans had never heard of. Golden confetti rained down from the ceiling. The audience was in a complete frenzy. Backstage, Courtney's mother was in tears. In the short interview that followed, Courtney was asked what she wanted people to feel when they heard her sing. She thought about it for a moment and said simply that she loved to sing because it made her feel free. The simplicity of that answer from a child standing in the middle of what had just become a life-changing moment hit viewers directly in the chest. It was not a rehearsed answer. It was not a calculated piece of interview strategy. It was just the truth, stated plainly by a young girl who had always known exactly what music meant to her. The clip of her audition was uploaded that night. By morning, it had crossed 10 million views. Within a week, it had been shared by people in countries Courtney had never visited, translated into languages she did not speak, and praised by music fans who had spent their entire lives following the artists she had grown up listening to. News outlets from major American papers to international broadcasters ran pieces describing her as a teenage Janis Joplin. The comparison was meant as the highest possible compliment, and it landed that way. Courtney Hadwin had walked into that arena as an unknown teenager from England. She walked out as a name the entire world was suddenly saying. What happens to a 13-year-old girl when the entire world suddenly wants a piece of her? That is not a question the entertainment industry often stops to ask carefully enough, and in Courtney's case, the answer unfolded in ways that were both triumphant and genuinely difficult. The weeks following her golden buzzer moment were a whirlwind of a scale that most adults would have found overwhelming. Courtney was managing her schoolwork through online sessions while preparing for the America's Got Talent live shows, doing press appearances, and adjusting to a level of public attention she had never experienced before. Television programs reached out. The Ellen DeGeneres Show brought her on for an appearance that had audiences charmed by her warmth and humor. She told Ellen she missed her dog back home, and the crowd melted. The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon had her perform live with Questlove providing a drum beat behind her, and Jimmy jokingly suggested they form a band. Courtney laughed and said she would think about it once she was caught up on her homework. She was funny and grounded and completely herself, even as the machinery of fame was spinning at full speed around her. Every interview she gave, every performance she delivered during the live shows, every clip that was shared online added more layers to the story the world was building about her. She became the feel-good narrative of that entire season, the little girl from England who came to America and made everyone remember what genuine musical talent actually sounds like. During the live shows, she performed with a maturity and stagecraft that left the production crew genuinely astonished. She learned quickly how to work with stage lighting and elaborate set designs without letting any of it distract from the emotional core of her performance. Producers noted that she approached every new technical challenge with a seriousness and focus that they rarely saw in adult contestants, let alone in a teenager competing for the first time on a stage of that magnitude. Record labels were already making inquiries. Merchandise companies were reaching out. The infrastructure of the music industry was circling, as it always does when it senses something valuable. Throughout all of it, Courtney kept calling home. She kept her mother's voice close. She remembered why she had started singing in the first place, not for fame, not for money, but because music made her feel free. That clarity, that sense of personal purpose, became the anchor that kept her steady in the middle of a very turbulent sea. But the storm was not finished with her yet. In early October of 2018, with the competition behind her and a rising public profile to maintain, Courtney joined a touring group of America's Got Talent finalists for a series of live shows across the American Midwest. It was the kind of opportunity that any young performer would have leaped at a chance to perform for live audiences night after night, to keep the momentum going, to prove that her talent was not a one-night television phenomenon, but something real and lasting. The tour moved from city to city by bus. It was a familiar arrangement for touring performers, a large vehicle, shared with fellow musicians, rolling through the night between venues, while everyone tried to sleep or scroll through messages, or simply stare out the windows at the passing darkness. One night in early October, the bus was traveling from Minneapolis toward Madison, Wisconsin on Interstate 94. Rain had been falling for hours. The highway was wet. The night was dark. Courtney sat near a window, reading messages from fans on her phone, watching the raindrops trace lines down the glass. Then the bus hit a stretch of road that had pooled with standing water, and a gust of wind pushed the vehicle sharply. The driver responded with braking, but on a wet surface at highway speed, the physics were unforgiving. The bus skidded sideways for nearly 20 feet before it struck the guardrail and came to a shuddering, grinding halt. In the sudden silence that followed, there was a moment of complete disorientation. Then the pain came. Courtney had been thrown forward in the impact, her head striking the luggage rack above her seat.